Excellent, excellent. Well, I always wanted to have a talk show. So, did you like the house band, my opening act? So, you saw some of the stories from the past. Thank goodness I grew a beard. Some of the stories, and what we know about Hoboken Grace is that we've always been built on stories. We've always loved capturing stories about how God is working in your lives and how God is working through you. It's a huge part of who we are. In fact, if you go to the app, you can click the bottom and you can see story after story after story of you and those who are watching online, those of us who've been with this on this journey for the past 15 years. But there is one story that we haven't captured just yet. And so we thought, what a great opportunity at our 15th birthday to capture their story. So would you please welcome my first guests, Chris and Anna High. Excellent, excellent.
It's dangerous to give him this much power.
Yes,
Way too much power.
Yes, it is. All right. Well, 15 years. Congratulations, all that you have been here for 15 years. I think the first question is, what is it like to raise a teenager?
It's hard.
Well, listen, I don't want me to just be able to ask the questions. I know you probably have some questions yourselves. So we're actually going to put a number up. There's the number, 201-354-4442. We're going to have you, I'm going to be able to read those questions. And if they're appropriate, I'll ask them. If they're not appropriate, I have your phone number. But we'd love to be able to ask some of those questions as well. But I think to get things started, the perfect question to be able to ask is, how did this start?
I think part of the story that a lot of people don't know is that, so Anna and I got engaged about a mile north of here. And it's interesting. Anna and I had known each other for a long time because she's my younger sister's best friend. I'm that guy.
Not the story we're going to focus on today.
It's not that kind of talk show.
But she had been ministering and working with college students in her school. I was working with college students in the city. And we started to talk about ministry a lot. We started talking about, okay, how do we impact? How do we reach more people? And we talked about that more and more and more and more. And at the same time, then my dad and I were planting a church together. And I began to realize that God wanted me to give my life to this community. And so when we got engaged, we actually talked about the church plant. And I asked her, I said, I think I'm going to spend my life here. And this is what we're going to do. And so would you be willing to do that with me? And she paused a long time.
I did. Very surprising question.
But then she said yes. And so that began this journey. And at first we didn't know where it was necessarily going to be because there had been a couple of church plants in Hoboken at the time. So we didn't know if it was going to be in Hoboken. I wasn't interested in planting a church right beside another church plant when there's so much need out there. So we were looking at Edgewater and Fort Lee and all over the place. We were just trying to figure out, okay, God, where do you want us? But, I will say this in saying that, because I think as we move through this, I want to make sure that there are things that we can take away from it. And I do think this is important. I think a lot of people have a vision of who they want to marry, and they're looking for a person who meets that vision, as opposed to discovering the vision that God wants you to give your life for, and then finding someone who shares that vision. Mm-hmm. And I think that's really our story. And then that's how it started. Beyond that, there were like 5 of us.
Yeah, we got married in 2006. We moved to Hoboken in 2007, and we started Hoboken Grace in 2008. Mm-hmm. Someone who's good at math should confirm that.
Mm-hmm. 15 years.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Awesome. We're getting some fun ones coming here.
Oh boy.
Chris, not a question, just a comment. Your hair looks cooler now, by the way.
I knew that one was coming.
Yeah. What's it like to get that comment? Anyway, you alluded to this a little bit. You alluded to this a little bit in your previous answer, but I would love for you to be able to expand on this a little bit more. Why Hoboken?
Well, for us, it was somewhat strategic because we wanted to be able to impact all of northern New Jersey. And we knew that those who moved to Hoboken, most of them are from New Jersey. And then they spend a little bit of time in Hoboken and they move back throughout New Jersey. And we figured if we could reach people here, we could literally influence the church across all of New Jersey, especially northern New Jersey. And we'd be able to plant these seeds that then could be taken out all over.
And we can influence people at a stage in life before they make these giant life decisions, right?
Yeah, because
And so
Hoboken at the time was much younger than it is now. And you think, what? But if you go back 15 years ago, the average age of Hoboken, I believe, was between 25 and 27. It was very young, and we thought, man, if we can impact them then, before they mess up their life, it might be...
Well, it impacts
really
who
did
they
think that
marry.
way.
It impacts how they start to raise their kids. And we wanted to make an impact at that point in someone's life.
Yeah. But we did have those church plants that started as we were kind of thinking where we were supposed to go, so we thought maybe God was leading us away from that. But then in the 2 years before we had to make the call of where we were going to be, 5 churches closed their doors in Hoboken.
So naturally, we thought,
That's where we're going.
That's where we're going.
That's where we're going.
this is what happens
But
when
it was,
you're,
I mean, it was
you're young.
difficult to plant a church here because of the fact that it was so transient. And I had people tell me, you can't do it, you can't do it, you can't do it. But Caleb has always been, our kids are all, their names are all variations of Caleb, and Caleb's story is one of my favorite stories in Scripture because when they go into the Promised Land, and Caleb lived his whole life with people telling him that they couldn't do it. Israel couldn't take the Promised Land. You'll never be able to do it. And when they went into the Promised Land, Caleb asked for the hardest part, specifically the part of the Promised Land that everyone said you're never going to win because there were giants there. And so I always somewhat kind of had that mentality of like, no, I want to go. I want to go where it would really demonstrate that God could do anything.
I'm glad you were strategic. I was like, that's a fun town. Let's do it. It's great. They have great restaurants.
Yeah.
It parallels because there are a lot of giants that live in Hoboken.
Yeah, there are some, yeah. Funny.
Wow, that's good. That's good. We have, so this question has come a couple of times, and a couple of people have texted it. What has been the most difficult part?
I mean, I think one of the difficult parts has probably been, we knew that people move a lot in this area. And we were, I think, mentally prepared for that, but then it actually happens, and, you know, it can definitely be hard. You say bye to a lot of really good friends, and, yeah, I think that's been a part of it that's been hard. We've had to kind of adjust maybe how we thought we were going to raise our kids or where we were going to raise our kids, you know. I don't think I ever really had this dream of like a house and the white picket fence, but I think somewhere deep down it was there. And there are no houses in Hoboken or white picket fences, you know. So there's probably an adjustment to all of that I think probably has made ministry a little bit harder in this area.
I think one of the things that people don't necessarily recognize, and it's probably one of the really hard things if you're going to be serious about impacting people, is that it's not just that you lose friendships or relationships because of the fact that people move, but also as you multiply and as the church grows, You don't get to spend the same amount of time with the people that you used to. And so even inside of Hoboken Grace, there are people who've been with us a very long time. And we're not as close as we used to be because of the fact that as you're multiplying, and all of you've kind of experienced this, especially if you're in a dinner group, you've experienced this, and we see this play out frequently where individuals will become a part of a group and then they build these relationships and they're really close. And then the group leader comes in and says, hey, listen, we've got to multiply. And the group says, no, we're not doing that. We're going to stay together forever. And I once did a message called Our Worst Core Value, and I talked about the value of connection. And specifically, I talked about when connection begins to trump multiplication. But at the core of Jesus' message, at the core of the gospel, is the idea that multiplication always has to trump connection. And so Jesus goes to the cross, and the Father and the Son's connection is severed for the purpose of multiplication, to include you and to include me. And then he says to the disciples, and this was hard for the disciples, he says, I want you to go, and I want you to leave each other. And they're like, we spent the last 3 years together. We're not doing that. And it takes them a while to leave Jerusalem because it's hard for them to value multiplication over connection, but you have to do that. And I think that's difficult. And so it shows up even in different ways there. I think for us personally, I mean, if you were to say what's the hardest day of the past 15 years, it was the day that our son was born with Down syndrome. I think nothing comes close to that. But when you talk about organizationally, what's the hardest thing? It was probably the day that my firstborn son was born.
Our poor kids.
I know. I explained this to him better after the first service because he was in here, and I was like, it wasn't you. It was... Well, my firstborn son was born on Easter.
Just tough when you're a pastor.
It's a bad idea. It wasn't even his due date, and he just...
He was early.
He was rebellious and was born on Easter, which is the worst day, and it was our second Easter, which was important for us. And I'd been in church planning for quite a while at that point, so I knew if we didn't have momentum in that Easter, if we really should have been around 120 at least if we were going to make it. And I wasn't there. My dad filled in for me that Easter. But I remember we had put all this work into it. It was funny. She woke up the night before and said, I'm in labor. And I said, no, you're not.
Literally. He was just like, no.
And I literally rolled over and went back to sleep. And then she woke me back up and said, no, I really am. And we put all this work into it. I remember calling after the service was over, calling John Carlos, who was a big part of planting this church, good friend through that time. And I asked him, how many did we have? And he said 72. I'll never forget that number. Because I thought, okay, my firstborn son is about to be born, and the church isn't going to make it. That was really hard. And I also thought to myself, my mother-in-law is going to be right.
I think she's in here, so be careful.
She is in here. But I remember when we first moved to Hoboken, she said, wait a second, so you don't have a job? I said, well, we're planning a church. So she said, so you don't have a job? And you're taking my daughter to the most expensive city in New Jersey. That seems foolish. I said, I think this is what God wants. And she said, I'm going to start saving for when you move back in with us. And I thought, oh man, she's going to be right. This isn't going to make it. And that was a hard season for me. That was really a hard time. Because there were a couple of churches in the city that I was good friends with, and their churches were growing, and our church wasn't. And I thought, man, what's wrong? What are we doing wrong? But God began to really challenge me, and He asked me this question. He said, are you interested in my kingdom growing, or are you just interested in your church growing? And that was a hard question. And so I began this practice of praying more for their churches to grow than our church to grow. And that was a turning point for Hoboken Grace. We've said this over and over again here It's so true. Before God does something through you, he almost always seeks to do something in you.
He really
and
does.
he was pretty intentional that if this is about just your church growing, then we're not going to do this.
Mm.
But if it's about my kingdom, then we can do something. But that was a hard season. Absolutely.
This one I like. A couple of people have asked this question. It could be a question for the both of you. Is there a message, a conversation series, or a conversation that sticks out as a highlight from the past 15 years?
I have no idea what she'll answer this question with.
That'd be good.
Me neither. I don't know.
Gotta make you feel
she's
good.
like, nothing stands out. There's really nothing that stands out, to be honest.
Well, thank you, Dana. I think honestly, probably in most of our relationship series, we talk about.
Anna hates our relationship series.
Well, I mean, you share a lot. All right? And most of the relationship series, I want to come in with like a hood and glasses.
That's right.
And
She's
just,
usually can be found pacing in the back in the hallways.
It's true.
I don't even come in. Yeah, I stay in the
like-
hallway. But in most of our relationship series, we talk a lot about, what physical chemistry is like and intellectual chemistry, but we always talk about spiritual chemistry. And
But you created that term, which is probably why it's your favorite series. There we go. See, we found it.
no. But I think it's something that we've experienced so much in our marriage that when things are changing, when life is changing, when things are chaotic, if your foundation, if you have that spiritual chemistry, even if all the other chemistries are like, meh, it pulls you through. It pulls you back every time, and it pulls you to each other and to God. And I love when we can share that with all of our people, when we can tell them, find someone that's going to push you towards God. It's just a game changer.
The Weightless series is probably my favorite.
That was a good one.
I think that what we understand, what we've come to understand and what we teach about forgiveness is really, really, really powerful.
Both of those are available on the app if you've never seen them. I honestly thought you were going to say payout.
Payout, I thought about saying payout because that was a
You
big
guys
one.
remember these names?
Because there was about a ton of corn on stage
Yeah, but I
for
think
payout.
if you go back and listen to that payout series, I think that was really powerful in understanding the long-term impact of your decisions. I think for all of us, it shook us up, and we thought, oh man, that's how life works, and that changed us.
I bet we can still find kernels of corn
You
right in
probably
this
can.
stage. I'm just saying. All right. We talked about the most difficult part. Natural next question. What's been the best part or some of the best parts?
You?
That's correct. All right, next question.
It's your story, your friendship, your sacrifice in loving this community. Getting to watch that. It's the best part.
Yeah, I think it was interesting. Before today, they put together like a highlight reel for 15 years before the service. And it was all these events and things that have happened at Hoboken Grace and like series titles and all these different things. And I said, no, that's not what we're showing. And that's when I asked them to put together the little clips of the staff stories. Because Hoboken Grace isn't about events. It's about people. It's about those stories. It's about what God's done in those people's lives. And I used to, when I was planting the church with my dad, I used to drive to this giant church that was near us, church building that was near us. The church had closed, but it was still this giant church building, and I used to sit in the parking lot just to reflect on the fact that we don't build organizations, we develop people. And every organization will eventually end, and that's fine, that's good. Because that's not what it's about. It's about people. It's about the people along the way. It's about the stories along the way. And I think that's the best part.
That's awesome. All right, tough question. Ready?
Oh, no.
Would you do it again?
Yeah. Yeah.
You know,
Don't
There-
hesitate too much.
She's not proposing.
you know, it's funny because you don't have to, it doesn't take a lot to answer that question. You just, is what God's done in John Milius' life worth it?
Every time.
Yep. I'd do it all for that. That one thing. That one thing. He's been a good friend. And it's been, and you could go around this room and you could say the same thing, you know, what God's done in your life and Dana's life and Sarah's life and Justin. I could share person after person after person. All of it's worth it. And it only takes one. It's interesting, you hear the story of Jesus leaving the 99 for the one. I think the part of it that you don't understand about the story is that the one makes it all worth it. And it
And you
really
know
only
what?
takes one.
Do you remember
Please leave room for the Holy Spirit.
we Do you remember we had this little like retreat with the 4 other people that were starting Hoboken Grace? There were only 4 or 5 of us.
When we had no money. Like, people don't know that too. We started Hoboken Grace with $4,000.
We
We
were
had
so
no money.
broke.
We had no money.
But I remember one of them, my brother-in-law, Steve, and he prayed. He said, Father, may this church, if we can reach one person. And I remember leaving that,
You were so angry.
and I was like, one person? This is so much work for one person. We're not doing all this for one person. And I was like literally talking to him about it.
And I was like, God, thank you for listening to him, but please let there be more than one person.
Please let there be. But it's funny now because you look back in 15 years later, and you think of any one of those people.
Yeah.
And it's a quick yeah, every time. There's no hesitation in that. Every life's worth it.
We love you guys.
I'm going to get an applause sign for my next episode. Just to get them to work on that.
Applause, laugh.
That's great. You know, you talk about the one, and today, at the end of the day, we will cross 481 baptisms in 15 years.
So
try
what
to
you're
get to-
saying is that there were 19 people who were disobedient.
That's right. let's get to 500 before the end of the year. People. Come on, work
Yes,
with me.
come on.
Let's do
Just
it.
jump on in.
Okay, last question. What has been the most, and I should answer that. I know you guys have all been texting. We're going to do a blog post in subsequent weeks to answer some of these questions. You know who you are. And I will be talking and praying for you. What has been the most significant thing or significant things that you've learned along the way?
I think for me, I knew reaching people was worth my life. I knew that. And I knew I trusted God, and I knew that He was faithful and that He would provide. But there's something that happens when you follow God into what he's calling you into, and you get to experience firsthand that he is actually faithful and that he is actually good, and that in times where I've cried out to him in seasons that were hard or anything like that, the truth is he has met me every single time. And I don't know that 15 years ago I knew just what this journey would do to my faith, what it would do to my experience of God. And he's so good. I mean, this whole thing, all of you are just an example of his provision, and I've been able to see it for 15 years, and it is by far the best part. He is the best part of all of this, and to get to know him better and experience him deeper is such a joy.
Yeah, I don't know that I could say exactly what the most significant thing is, but I do know that I've been able to see lived out what you see in Hebrews. And I think it was something that I understood before, but now I've seen it. I know it. And there's this passage in Hebrews 11, and it says this. It says, faith shows the reality of what we hope for. And I don't think many of us understand this. What he's saying is that when you step out in faith, it demonstrates the reality of what you hope for, because it demonstrates God's faithfulness. And what we've been able to watch for 15 years is people step out in faith and God be faithful, and it demonstrates the reality that we hope for, that God was good and faithful, and it consistently makes evidence. And I love how he continues, because he says, it is the evidence of things we cannot see. It gives evidence to what you can't see. And we've been able to experience that for 15 years. And we've watched it in life after life after life after life, people who've stepped out in faith. Because as he continues, he gives all these stories. He talks about, look at Abel stepped out in faith, and it allowed us to be able to see God's faithfulness. And it's not just us and us stepping out in faith. It's that so many of you who are here, you've taken steps of faith, and you've allowed people to see the faithfulness of God because you've taken that step. And it's given evidence. And people will say to me, oh, faith is blind. You just step out blindly. No, you don't. You step out on generations and generations and generations of God's demonstrated faithfulness. It's demonstrated. And, he gets to chapter 12 and he says, therefore, since we're surrounded by such a huge crowd of witnesses to the life of faith. In other words, he says, since we have so much evidence, I mean, my goodness, look at all of the evidence in here. Look at all the evidence in this room. He says, since we have so much evidence, then let us live a life of faith. And, as we share our story, that's what the past 15 years is. It's evidence. It's evidence of the faithfulness and the power of God. The grace and mercy and glory of God. That's what it's evidence of. And that's not just because we said yes. It's because so many of you said yes. And as we share this story, I want to say to all of you who are here, all of you who are watching online, going back to Steve and Alexis and all of those who are part of this journey, thank you for saying yes. Because in saying yes, you allowed people to see the faithfulness of God. In saying yes, you became one of those witnesses. And you gave evidence to that which would not have otherwise have been seen. And that's amazing. And as we step into this next part of our journey here at Hoboken Grace, for all of you who are here, you get a chance to be a part of that. But everything that has happened for the last 15 years is because of people who've said yes to God, who've decided, no, I want to be one of those witnesses, and I want to step out in faith, and I want to provide that evidence for the people who will be sitting in this gathering when we reach 20 years. And so I just say thank you to those of you who have, and what an amazing thing for us to be able to see that together.
We are so grateful.
And I look forward to what that looks like next.
I think we can applaud that.
You really do need a sign.
Well, as we end today, I was trying to figure out a great way to end it, and they didn't like the idea, because it's Super Bowl Sunday, for me to come up and pour a bunch of Gatorade over Chris's head. But I'm going to invite the elders up here so they can pray and take things over. Oh, I'm making messes.
Hi, everyone. My name is Justin, if you don't know me. I'm one of the service chaplains here, and I'm being joined today by the elders of Hoboken Grace. I'd love for you to meet them. There's Kyle and Matt and Janine, and we just really wanted to give them an opportunity not only to celebrate 15 years of what God has done here in Hoboken Grace, but also to celebrate something else that we're celebrating this year, which is that Chris has been in ministry for 20 years. So we just wanted to take an opportunity to celebrate that, because being in ministry is such a commitment. And you're constantly taking risks, and you're constantly being confronted with the opportunity that somebody's going to tell you no, or you're doing it wrong, or whatever, and you're constantly taking that risk. But Chris has, for years, continued to say yes to God. He's continued to say yes to him, and listen for his voice and follow him wherever it goes. It's kind of challenging to lead a ship as big as this with so many people's lives impacted, and he continues to do that on a personal basis and also for all of us. So we wanted to celebrate 20 years for Chris. And so we have this gift.
Thank you.
But as I say that, one of the other things I wanted to acknowledge is what that means for Anna. And I happen to know that Anna has to sacrifice a lot. Every time Chris says yes, Anna has to sacrifice. Every time Chris turns in a direction where God is leading him, that means that Anna has to carry that as well. And Anna, you have done a fantastic job, and I just wanted to say thank you for saying yes to Chris, saying yes to God, and for all that you have done for us and sacrificed for us over these years. We really appreciate it. Will you join me as I just say a word of prayer? Hey, Dad. I just wanted to say thank you. Thank you for all the people that you have brought into this community, for how it demonstrates your love for the people of Hoboken and the surrounding communities and even the whole world, and how you continue to just pour your love into us through these people. But I just want to take a moment to say especially thank you for sending Chris and Anna here, for the impact that they've had, for their willingness to say yes and face hard and difficult times, and their willingness to follow you. Thank you for sending them to us, to guide us, to lead us, to help us to know more about who you are. We're really grateful. Thank you so much. Will you join me in celebrating them one more time?